Welcome. My name is Oriana Ides. Today is part 3 of a really fabulous series. Today we'll be focusing on connecting students and systems, supporting middle and high school teachers and staff to prepare grieving students for college. As a longtime teacher, a longtime school therapist, and a college access director, this conversation today is so incredibly important and often not had. So thank you for showing up for it. Thank you for centering this aspect of our work as educators. We are funded by SAMHSA. The ideas that are presented today are our own, though they do support us. They are not SAMHSA's ideas. Take a deep cleansing breath and arrive fully to this moment. Exhale anything that does not serve you in being present for this conversation. As I said at the beginning, my name is Oriana Ides. I am a field coach with the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. We are hosting today's conversation in this 3-part series along with Inner Harbor. Our aim is to promote effective and sustainable change within school systems, especially after big things have occurred. And we do that in a variety of ways. One, hosting conversations as such, but also through technical assistance, coaching, through a variety of publications. We invite you to view our website if you haven't already and get familiar with our work, get connected to our work. It's a little bit more about the recovery and renewal process. Much goes into preparing a community to heal beyond something big that has occurred. So we look at readiness and response, but we look also more closely at the week, the month, the years after a big thing has happened, and creating a collective dialogue, story, narrative within communities that help ensure safety and stabilization. Today is the third in a series of 3. We started with setting the stage, looking at grief on campus, the experience of some young people that experienced really big things on campus and what that meant for them to have spaces of connection and safety. We took a deeper dive into meaning making. And then today, right here, is this beautiful and necessary conversation, bridging high schools with colleges to navigate supports. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Mandi.
Thank you. Excited to be here for the third in this series. I'm really happy to partner with Christina Jones from Guardian Lane, who's going to also participate today. We're going to be talking about connecting students and systems by supporting middle and high school staff and teachers to prepare grieving students for college. We thought we would just start with a quick introduction. My name is Mandi Zucker. I'm the founder of Inner Harbor. I started Inner Harbor in 2019 in August. My oldest son is a junior in high school and college. I had been working at a grief support center supporting children and families. I thought I would be there until I retired. I loved the work. When he left for college, a friend of his also left and ended up taking his own life just a few days after he got to college. This was a kid whose father had died when he was 14. I thought I had done a good job getting him, some grief support for him and his mom and his sister at the time. When he left for college, I think he didn't have the supports available that he needed. He didn't know what resources were available. You turn 18 and we wash our hands of so many of the things that kids need. And then we ship them off to college far away where they don't have friends and family and all the supports. So I decided when he died that I was going to start my own organization to make sure that college students have the support that they need. I opened Inner Harbor on the 1-year anniversary of his death in August of 2020. That's a little bit about me. I'm going to turn it over to Kristina so you can introduce yourself.
Thank you for sharing that, Mandi. I actually didn't know that. What a beautiful reason for creating what you did. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Jones. I am a former grieving student. My father died from cancer when I was 7 years old. Throughout my school experience, I didn't get the support that I needed from my school or my grieving mother. I'm here to share my experience, what I wish I had, so that we can make sure that your grieving students are supported when experiencing such a big life event like going to college. I will also share my company, Guardian Lane, which offers virtual grief support for your students in a very fun way, so that we can set them up for success to help you effortlessly support them and also bring help into the home so that it is a full circle support system for your students.
Kristina. I'd love to learn a little bit more about all of you as well. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jamboards. I learned about them here. Jerry just put it in the chat. If you click on that link to the Jamboard, Jamboards are like bulletin boards. There's little like sticky notes and you can move them around. If you would like to put your name, where you're from, your title, something about you. I like it better than the chat box just because it's all there on one screen. So we can all see who we are and where we're from. And I always find that these kinds of sessions, these workshops, are great ways to network. I'm a big believer in networking. Feel free to go introduce yourself on the Jamboard and let us know if you're having any difficulty with that. I always like to say that I feel very fortunate, privileged to be the facilitator of this conversation today, but I know that I'm just one person in a room full of wisdom and expertise. I would really love the opportunity for all of us, including myself, to learn from one another. This is what I came up with for the presentation today, but if there are things that people would like to hear about, would like to learn about, and would like to share, I do hope that we have opportunities where we can all do that today. Feel free to jump in, ask questions. I probably won't be looking too much at the chat box, but we have Jerry on the line, so she's going to be able to do that. If there are questions, things that come up, please put them in and we will make sure to try to address them if we can during the presentation, if we can't at the end. I thought we would just start with some statistics. And actually, these statistics were updated this week. Some of this has changed and it's not good news. This was from 2021. 1 in 14 children will lose a parent or a sibling before they are 18 years old. That's about 5.3 million kids. And actually this week, new information came out. That number has now changed to 1 in 13 children will lose a parent. That number now more than doubles to 13.9 million by the time they turn 25. These numbers only include parents and siblings. They don't include primary caregivers like grandparents or other guardians. So that number is a very small part of the number of grieving children. We are potentially sending over 5.5 million students to college every year who may not know how to cope with the significant losses that they have experienced. And a whole bunch more, right, that are going to experience a loss, a significant loss in the 4 years that they're at college. So I like to just point that out because sometimes people think, oh, it doesn't happen that often, or it's just one kid that we know of. It's not like a problem that we have in our school. Oftentimes we don't even know about it. There's not like a questionnaire at the beginning of the year about who in your family has died recently or who are you grieving. These numbers are really important to remember that 1 in 13, basically in every single classroom, there's probably about 1 or 2 that are grieving a pretty significant loss. I thought we would start with an overview of some of the issues that are happening on college campuses. I'm assuming that most of you are not working in the college space. I wanted to just frame what we've been learning in the past couple of years about mental health and grief on college campuses. The first thing is that there's a real lack of mental health services available. When my son's friend died, I had to call my son who had just gotten to college, a freshman. He didn't have any friends or he didn't know about any resources. He was in the athletic center. He was playing basketball with people were playing. He was trying to make some friends. And I called him to tell him that his friend had just died. I suggested that he call the counseling center, to which he said, okay. He had never been to counseling. He didn't know what to do. And he just felt like he needed to talk to someone. So he called the counseling center. Day 4 of college, there was a 3-week waiting list. I told him, let's get you a therapist in the community. Fortunately, we have the resources, or I can pay for an Uber if he needs to, and he can go into town. He's out of state. So our insurance is a little weird. Maybe this is common, I don't know. In order for him to go see a therapist out of state, he had to get a primary care doctor in state. So we went through a whole bunch of trouble to try to find a primary care doctor. Many of them weren't taking new patients, a whole bunch of things. Couldn't get an appointment for 2 months with a primary care doctor for a new patient. He made the appointment, but then he canceled it. He never went. He never got therapy. I share that story because I think it is so important to realize how difficult it is for students to be able to get services. Many students report not knowing how to access the support. And then, of course, if they do know how, the lack of support available is an issue. According to the American School Counselors Association, the national average ratio of school counselors to students was 1 to 424. They recommend 1 to 250, which seems really high to me. I don't know how you can have a caseload of 250, but not all students come to the counseling center. The recommendation is 1 to 250, and the average right now is 424. There is no way that all the students that need support will be able to get it in a timely manner and with the frequency that they need with numbers. Also, if students have had negative experiencing accessing support as young children, that can carry over into college, so that they're going to have this understanding that school counselors aren't really available. That may affect their decision to seek support in the first place when they get to college. Another issue is burnout amongst counselors. It is real, along with the difficulty in hiring qualified personnel, is making adequate support even more challenging for schools. I read a report yesterday stating that 93% of clinicians on college campuses have experienced burnout in the fall semester of 2021. 60% of them said that the increase in their caseloads has negatively impacted the quality of their work. They're even willing to admit that they are not able to do the work because their own burnout and the increase in their caseloads. At the same time, there's been a significant increase in awareness of grief and mental health needs in general, which is great, right? The pandemic has certainly shined a light on the grief that students are experiencing. We know that we're all grieving, so that's been a good thing that this awareness has highlighted. Students have been asking for more mental health support for a long time, but the pandemic has really forced administrators and leaders on college campuses to accept the reality. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that therapy or counseling is the only answer, but the fact that we need to think probably more creatively about how to support grieving students has become quite clear. Another point about college campuses is that there has been an increase in suicide attempts resulting in ER visits. The rate of suicide has remained relatively stable. Some reports actually report even a slight decline, but the number of suicide attempts has risen sharply, especially for adolescent girls. In the past couple of years, only attempts that result in significant physical harm end up in the emergency room. So we know that there are attempts that are not ever reported. We also know that people have been doing everything they can to stay out of emergency rooms for good reasons. So that number is probably much higher. That's important because unsupported childhood grief puts children at risk for all sorts of things, including mental health issues, eating disorders, self-harm, drug and alcohol use, of course, at its worst, suicidality. At the same time that all of this is happening, there is a really sincere desire from staff to support students. They also admit that they don't know how. According to the American Federation of Teachers, 70% of teachers have a grieving student in their classroom, but only 7% have any bereavement training. Many teachers report that administrators pay more attention to the dress code. In this study, the teachers reported that only 3% of school districts provide any kind of grief support. Not having grief education for staff can be really detrimental to students. I worked in 3 different school districts many years ago. The first one, I had no grief training at all. I had worked in a hospice for 1 year, mostly with older people that were dying. There was a time while I was working in one district, the school nurse died by suicide. And they called all of the social workers to the school where it happened to provide support. This was before social media, so many students didn't know what happened at all, and others had heard a rumor about suicide, but had not been really discussed. There was no formal reports or information shared. As social workers, we were given no direction, no instruction about how to share this information or how to respond. And I can tell you, I did the wrong thing. This was a beloved school nurse who always had hot chocolate in her office. All the kids gathered there. I wasn't sure what they knew, but in my attempt to make a student feel better, as he shared that he didn't know why she died, I said something like, "At least she isn't in pain anymore." I was trying to make him feel better, right? I have since learned a bunch And I know several things. First of all, at least is not a good way to start a sentence with a griever. It really minimizes their feelings. Secondly, I basically told this child that if he's in pain, kill yourself and you won't be in pain anymore. Now, I don't even know if he knew she had died by suicide. The point is that I didn't have the training to provide the appropriate kind of support that this child needed. I would do it better now. Another time, after I did receive some training, I was working in a different district and a student died. We got a call that all psychologists must go to the school to provide support. The school psychologist sitting next to me was terrified. She told me, I do IQ testing. That's what I know how to do, and I don't want to go. So I called the superintendent and explained to them that I'm trained in grief support and I will go in her place. The superintendent told me that the union rules state that psychologists must go and that social workers were not allowed to go. So I was fairly well trained at that point. I stayed in my office. She, who admittedly had no training or comfort with grief, was left to provide support. And that shows you why it's so important that we're all trained, right? We all need to provide the needed attention and the presence to all grieving students. I'm going to turn it over to Kristina, and Kristina is going to share a little bit about what her experience was like in college, as well as some of the things that might have been helpful to her.
Thank you. If I think back to while I was in college, what support was helpful for me? Let me take a step back. I was that student who didn't have that support. No one asked if I needed help. Nobody knew that I was even grieving. I had to find my own personal ways to support myself and to cope and to heal and to really distract my thoughts. One thing that was helpful for me was to find programming and communities that were similar to the ones that I had back at home. I went to school in Miami, Florida, but I was from Los Angeles, California. So I was 2,700 miles away from home with nobody nearby to call on. I knew nobody in Miami, Florida. To help me stay sane and get distracted from my thoughts and my grief, I had to distract myself. And I did that with programming. I was heavily involved in the arts and theater in Los Angeles. I wiggled my way into the theater club in Miami, Florida at my school, Florida International University, and just stayed busy. I dedicated all my time to staying around people. What are some of the things that I struggled with in college? If I look back now, definitely relationships were tough for me. I had unhealthy breakups where I contribute that to my fear of being alone and to losing someone close to me. I wanted to be close to the people I dated, and that caused them to pull away. If you look at long-term effects of childhood grief, unhealthy attachment is actually one of them, but I didn't recognize that until I was much older. Some of the things that I wish I knew or had support prior to getting into college, I wish my high school knew that I was a grieving student. Because they didn't know, support was never put in front of me. I think that schools, high school, middle schools, elementary schools, they have a responsibility to know the life experiences of their students. In part of the onboarding, do a screening for ACEs so that you can know which students are grieving or have had certain life experiences to provide group support for your students. I wish I would have known about a mental health program at my college. I wish I would have known that my college even had a therapy or counseling center. I had no clue. I didn't reach out for it because it wasn't presented to me. I wish I would have known that there were grief centers available. At the time, I didn't even know grief centers existed. I wish I would have known that it was okay to do meetups with other grieving students so that we could know who each other were on campus and we could support each other should one of us be having a tough time, to be surrounded by people who get it. These are the things I didn't have that I wish I had. Hopefully, these bring ideas for how to talk to your students that are going to college to help them prepare a list of things that they should be thinking about to build that community and support system wherever they go.
Thank you, Kristina. How can professionals, students, staff of elementary, middle, and high school students really prepare students for the environments on college campuses? I'm just the facilitator of this discussion, so I hope that you can all participate and share ideas that you have regarding preparing students for this transition if they've already lost a family member before going to college. So think about ideas that you may have, and we'll give you a chance to share some ideas that you have as well. So the first thing is that you really want to help them determine what mental health resources are available on college campuses. If any of you have been to college lately or have kids that go to college, you take these tours virtually or in person, you can ask the tour guide about mental health services. Most of them are going to say, of course, it's right there, it's accessible, we do virtual and online. They'll say nice things like that. But we probably want to dig a little deeper. If you know that a student is going to have, and all students really have a pretty big transition going to college, but if they've already experienced a loss and you know that they're going to college and they're probably going to lose some of the support systems that they already have, you want to dig a bit deeper about the mental health support that is available. What is the ratio of counselors to students? How many sessions do they get? Many colleges max out at 5 sessions, 6 sessions, maybe 10 sessions. It's really important to know that, like, how many sessions can I actually get and see a therapist? You can ask to see the mental health office's annual report to learn how the money that they have is being spent. So how are they supporting kids on college campuses? Are they doing trainings? Are they paying therapists? Are they providing opportunities for mental health organizations on campus? What are they doing with the money that they have? You can also ask if there is grief support on the campus. Some campuses do offer support groups, or they might know about support groups that are in the area. There's probably over 500 grief support centers across the country, which sounds like a decent amount, but it's not really when you think about it, right? There's so many colleges. If kids don't have access to transportation, if they're not really close by, it's going to be hard to find them. If that's something that your students have been engaging in now and they feel like they'd like to continue to do that, you should look into whether or not there is a grief support center either close by or that the college offers grief support on campus. You also want to check in about the counseling center. Where is the counseling center? Is it all the way over there, or is it in the gym at Penn State? They offer a really cool program where they have counselors embedded in each college. In the College of Education, the business school, there's counselors right there in the building. So they're not actually going to a separate counseling center. They walk into the same building that they would walk into for class, and they've embedded it in that way. Some other schools are embedding counselors in student organizations, maybe religious organizations on campus. So it's not like this separate counseling center. Some of them are near the gyms. And how does that feel for each student? Some students might really like that. Some might feel, I don't want it to be next to the gym. I want it to be separate. Those are really good questions to be asking. Is there virtual sessions, or is it only in person? If it's virtual, do they have spaces where they can meet with them? You may not be able to meet with your therapist in your dorm room if you have a roommate. Some counseling centers, since COVID, created these Zoom rooms where you can go to the counseling center and go into a special room. You're meeting with your therapist at the counseling center, but not in the same room. Some libraries also will offer spaces. They're just quiet spaces, little rooms where you can Zoom with people if you're doing work or meeting with therapists, talking to your girlfriend. No one knows what you're doing. They are offered throughout different locations on college campuses. You can also ask about student-run mental health organizations. There's plenty of them, Active Minds. There's a lot of different kinds of mental health services available through student organizations. And it's a great way to get your students involved in the college community as well. So those are some good things to think about when you're looking for mental health support on college campuses. If people have other ideas, feel free to put them in the chat. I would love to hear about them. I think it would be helpful for other people as well. Next is peer support. I'm so happy to be here with all of you doing this training. However, we know that students turn to one another when they're struggling before they turn to teachers and counselors, especially in college. That's their primary source of support, their peers. So it's really critical that peers know how to listen and provide support when somebody needs it. If you're looking for training at your school, looking to teach children, peers, classmates, how to be really good listeners to grieving friends, reach out to me afterwards. We can certainly talk about that later. Another one is the Coalition to Support Grieving Students. They also offer great resources with some online trainings that can be very helpful to learn about peer support. But it really is key to make sure that students know how to support one another, because they are their first line of defense. The next thing is that we want to make sure that students have the support that they need at the time. If we wait 5 years until they get to college, all of the support that they could have gotten and learned about being resilient and using some of the resources, they haven't had that yet. The National Alliance for Children's Grief is an alliance of grief support centers around the country. That's how you can find all of those centers. Their website is www.childrengrieve.org. It includes tons of resources and also a support group finder. Getting support at the time of their loss is so important. You can look to see if there's a grief support group near you, so you can get them connected right away. Going to support groups helps students know that they're not alone. It also helps them get comfortable talking about their loss. And that is so important when they get to college, because often they have to tell people about their loss for the first time, maybe for the first time ever, maybe it's the first time in a long time. And being comfortable sharing that information is key to getting the sense of connection and community with others, which has been shown to be so important when you're transitioning to college. The Alliance is also really important because when kids go to college, they can use it to find grief support near them if it's not on their campus. If your student is looking for support and the college that they're interested in doesn't provide it, checking that website to see if there's anything nearby their school is really key. Another support that is great to know about, and some of these, I listed them at the end of the presentation, so you'll get them again, but is Heal Grief, healgrief.org, which is an amazing free resource for older teens and young adults to get support. If you're a middle school staff member, it might not be appropriate for that age, but as they're transitioning out of high school and getting into college, they offer twice monthly free virtual support groups for any young adult who's grieving. They have an app that you can download, and then you sign up for this drop-in support groups, meaning that you don't have to go every single time. You just go when you are available. You can begin when you're in high school and continue no matter where you end up. It's always been virtual. That was their model 10 years ago, and it continues to be. You can jump on that virtual support through the app wherever you are. Another one I want to mention is the dinner party. That's really great for young people to know about. It's for people in their 20s to maybe 40s. As students are graduating from high school, it might be a good thing to know about. It's about building community, talking about death over dinner, or not even dinner if you don't want to. You can go to a virtual dinner or be matched to a buddy for a dinner party. And the dinner parties are really tailored to the host's interests or their experience, like a suicide loss or BIPOC spaces, parent or sibling loss, or LGBTQ plus loss. I'm going to add those resources at the end of the presentation. I wanted to point them out because there's a lot of really good things that will help with the transition, because they're going to be losing some of the supports that they had. We want to add some supports as they're leaving so that they have those as well. If you have other ideas that you'd like to share about the transition, please put them in the chat box. And if we can figure out this Jamboard, then I'll add them to it as well. Next, I'm going to share this video from Guardian Lane about support that children can get at the time of their loss. Kristina, I don't know if you want to introduce it or say anything, or if you want to wait until afterwards.
Yeah, I'll wait until after.
Okay, so I'll just show the video now.
Hi, schools. I'm Christina Jones, founder and CEO of Guardian Lane, your on-demand resource for grief counseling projects that your students can do in person with your staff or from the comfort of their homes the second grief hits. Thank you for wanting to support your students through such a difficult time in their lives. And to help you, we have sourced the best grief counselors and therapists to create fun and engaging projects your students will love.
My name is Paige. I'm here to teach you how to write a song from the heart. My name is Danica. Nice to meet you.
They will also support their emotional and social development along their healing journey. In the following videos, we will walk you through the site from A to Z, showing you how to sign up your school, add your students, how we automatically send a consent form to the student's guardian, and more. If you ever have any questions or would like to set up a meeting to see the Guardian Lane experience live, please feel free to email me at kjones@guardianlane.com. A grieving student with no support cannot focus on learning. So thank you for wanting to help them get back on track.
Thank you. So that was an introduction to Guardian Lane. I just want to quickly talk about why Guardian Lane exists. One of the things that we found, help was not consistent in a school environment, if it even existed. And our kids live in an on-demand world. There's so many amazing, brilliant resources out there, and we wanted to bring all of those into the digital format that kids are used to now, so that help can be available the second that they need it. There is a school experience where a teacher, school counselor, anyone who is supporting students can have a dashboard where you can add students. It automatically gets sent home to the child's or the student's guardian so that they can access the videos and projects at home. As we know, grief doesn't always hit on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. So this allows students to be able to support themselves whenever they feel like they need it. It also allows caregivers and schools to offer consistent support together. You can do projects with the student in the office. You can sometimes put it on a computer so that any grieving student who maybe gets triggered in a class can have support immediately in your office. And then also they have it when they get home. If at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, they are stuck in their feelings. And it allows students to discover and learn different ways to work through specific grief emotions. These are techniques and activities from experts that will stay with them as they go into college and in life. So it allows them to learn techniques to help them be able to process their grief. So thank you. I think in the chat, they left information on how to create an account. You can always email me. And also there is a video. I'll also link to a toolkit that has the tutorial video and other PDFs on ways to support your grieving students. Thank you for allowing me to share Guardian Lane with you.
Thank you, Kristina. Besides equipping them with support that they need right in the moment, which I think really is so key, you also want to equip students with crisis support. I think a lot of people say that when we talk about like letting, kids support other kids, right? Learning how to listen to them, they get a little nervous because they're like, what if they say something that's like bigger, right, than what they can handle? We want to equip them all with crisis support. So they know that, first of all, if it's too big for them, that they can offer support to friends, but also for the griever, they need to know that if there's no one around or no one that they feel comfortable with, there is crisis support available at all times. So providing training to students to assess, they don't have to know like this person is definitely suicidal or not, but know about this is bigger than me, right? So I need to know about resources that may be available. That is so important as part of a training that I would do certainly, but that people should be doing when you're working with students. They don't always know where to turn. They haven't gotten comfortable with the supports that may be available in a new place. So I always recommend providing them with emergency support systems, such as the Not Okay app, which I'll talk about, and the crisis text line, as well as reminders how to be there for a friend in need. I also like to just say that some of these supports, like the crisis text line, it doesn't have to just be in a crisis. So we'll talk about that too, but they're available really for anyone all the time. I wanted to introduce you if you're not familiar with the Not Okay app. It's a free app. It was created by a high school student. It allows users to input contacts that will be notified if you're not okay. All you do is touch the button and then your contacts will get a notification that says you're not okay. Those contacts can then respond immediately while the app provides breathing exercises while they're waiting for them to get in touch with crisis lines if that's what's needed. And then the contacts can say, I'm available, I'm on my way, or they could say, I'm not available. And then there's a few contact people that you could put in. So hopefully somebody is available. When the user is then okay, at some point, they can let their contacts know that they're doing better. I actually downloaded the app. I practiced it. I told my family, I'm downloading this app. I'm putting you in as contacts. We practiced it. They got a little notification that said, Mandi is not okay. Can you respond to her? My husband said, no, I can't respond right now. My son said, yes, I can respond. So we could see what happens. All the while, I'm getting these messages from the app that's take deep breaths. They're practicing me breathe, helping me breathe. It was really very helpful. So I really recommend that app. The crisis text line, I really do want to talk about that. It's 24/7. It's available really to anyone in emotional distress. It does not have to be the person who is actively suicidal. You can have gotten a bad grade on a test and you're afraid to tell your parents, or your spring break trip got canceled, whatever it is that's just stressing you out, you can call that number and just talk to them. It does not have to be a crisis. We used to call them hotlines. We're now trying to call them warm lines. It's not necessarily, you don't have to be hot to call. And I think that's really important. Another one is VAR from Active Minds. Active Minds is a really great organization that does a lot of work in the high school, college mental health space. They developed a training model called VAR, which I'm going to show you a little video about, but it's really a simple way for peers as well as teachers to learn about suicide and to feel confident that they're providing the appropriate level of support to a friend in need. So I'm going to just show you a quick video on VAR, and if people have questions, we can certainly access that. Oh, somebody just wrote, I'm not recommending the crisis text line right now since about 40% of texts are not being answered. That's interesting. I guess that's a staffing issue, I assume, and very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know that. Okay, I'm going to show the VAR video.
Hey, has this ever happened to you? Maybe a friend, teammate, coworker, loved one says something like, I've been having a hard time lately. I've been feeling really anxious. I'm overwhelmed. If it sounds like more than a bad day, it probably is. So, what could you do? Consider this an opening to start a conversation with your friend. Talk and listen using VAR. Validate, appreciate, refer. VAR. An easy way to let someone know it's okay to not be okay, and you are not alone. Here's how it works. V. Validate their feelings. Let them know what they're feeling is okay, and that you believe them. Validate sounds like, I'm really sorry you're struggling right now. I believe you. I hear you. That must be really hard to deal with. Even though you might not totally relate, your friend's feelings are always valid. A. Appreciate their courage. Speaking up can be hard. It's not easy to admit you're struggling. Appreciate sounds, thank you so much for telling me. That took a lot of courage. I don't know what to say. I'm just so glad you told me. I love you and I'm here for you if you want to talk or need anything. Show that you're there to support them. Let them know you care and they're not alone. R. Refer them to skills and support. Sometimes what a person needs is someone to listen, though sometimes they need more. Refer sounds like, want to take a break from studying and go watch a movie? I've been using this meditation app. It's really helped me slow down my thoughts. Can we make plans to go on a run together tomorrow? I think it might be helpful to talk to someone. Can I go with you? Show that help is available and that you're with them. Could it be that easy? Yes. VAR conversations can start in any order and can take any form. Phone, in person, text message, even FaceTime. There's no exact right thing to say. In fact, most of us are afraid of saying the wrong thing, so we end up saying nothing at all. Always assume you're the only one who's reaching out, and know that it's not the exact words that count as much as your presence. Listening, connecting, accepting. You can make a generous and empathetic choice to be there, and could be making all the difference in the world for your friend. Are there things not to do or say? Yeah. Be aware that these aren't really helpful. saying, "It's fine, you'll get over it." Offering tips to fix them, saying, "Don't be so emotional, you're so dramatic," or "Man up," minimizing or comparing how your friend feels by looking for something positive in their situation, such as, "Well, at least," assuming everyone experiences the same condition in the same way. Just be yourself. One therapist compares it to being a dolphin swimming alongside. Guide your friend with a helpful nudge and be on the journey with them. Remember, you don't have to be an expert to help. You don't even have to understand what your friend is going through. Just showing you care and being there in a moment of need is what it's all about.
I don't know if anybody has any comments or feedback, any thoughts that they have about that video. You can raise your hand or just jump in if you'd like to, or put some comments in the chat box. The reason I like VAR because it's so simple and it makes people feel a little bit more confident asking their friends, "Are you okay?" A lot of us don't ask because we're afraid of the answer, which means that the person who's really struggling doesn't get asked if they're okay, which leaves them really isolated, scared, and alone, which is the last thing that we want. We care about them so much. It's an opportunity to help teachers, students, just to say, "I know your dad died a month ago. How are you doing? That must be really hard. Tell me." It's a simple model, and I think it's fairly easy to understand and use. Let's see if I can move on. There we go. So I talked before about the fact that kids oftentimes rely on their peers first, which is why it's really important that we teach students to be able to share feelings and to connect with each other around their grief. So the first thing that I think is so important is that we need to model how to be vulnerable for them. This doesn't mean that you have to share personal details of your own lives with your students, but you can show them that you're affected by things. You can be affected by their stories, by current events. You could say things like, "That would make me feel really sad. How are you doing?" I think oftentimes I worked in 3 different school districts, and many of it was before I had any training. We would often hear, and I would often say, "I have to be strong for the kids. No time for me right now. This isn't about me. This is about them." Looking strong may send the message that feelings are not okay. If something really sad happens, if there's a death in your school and you have to look strong so that you're making space for the kids, right? You're their model and you're showing them no, and in your mind, you're thinking you're doing that so that you're creating space for them to be able to show emotion. But we all know students look up to their teachers. They want to be just like them. If you look stoic and unemotional, they may try to imitate that and not show feelings. So sometimes suppressing our own feelings so we can make space for others does just the opposite. So really our role is to show them how to express feelings. Talk to them about how you express feelings. Maybe you listen to music, or you write, or you play sports or video games. You want to talk to them about what's important to you and how you cope with some of the things that are going on in your own lives. However, I also think that it's important that your own limits. You may not be in a place to absorb the emotional pain of others. I always say that knowing that is a gift, because showing students that you're taking care of yourself is equally important. So it's okay to say, "Listen, I can tell that you're going through a really tough time, and what you have to say is important and it deserves the right amount of time and attention. And I wish I could give that to you, but right now I just can't. So I'm going to introduce you to my friend or my colleague, right? The guidance counselor, the school nurse, the volunteer listener at the crisis line, because I want to make sure that there's somebody there that can listen to you and give you the attention that you need and deserve." And that's a gift, because if you try to listen to them when you're not really available, then you're not really doing them a service. And you're also showing them boundaries and how to take good care of yourself, which is how they learn how to take good care of themselves. So it's really important to know your boundaries. I always say you have to be emotionally wealthy to be able to do this work. I like to think of myself, at the moment anyway, as fairly emotionally wealthy. It's basically the only wealth I have, but that's okay. I like to think I'm emotionally wealthy, if nothing else. So at the moment, I am in a place where I can provide some support. I can absorb some of that. I can give some of my emotional wealth away. If I was not emotionally wealthy at this moment, I don't have anything to give. I have to fill my own emotional piggy bank before I can give any of that away. So sometimes I'm just not in that place, or some things are too costly to me. Perhaps I can hear about cancer, but I can't hear about car accidents because there's something in my life that happened that makes car accidents too difficult for me. So I know car accidents are going to be really expensive, and I don't have that much wealth to give away. So I'm going to help them find someone else to talk to when they're talking about that. But if it's something else, I can handle that. And knowing what you can handle is really a gift. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about yourself with me. If you would like to share a loss, that would be great, so we can hear how I'm going to respond. If you'd like to, if you don't want to share a death loss and you want to share about the vacation you missed because of COVID, or you opened your cabinet this morning and there was no cereal and that was a loss for you this morning, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, I just need one person. I'm going to ask you to share your story with me for about 2 minutes, and I'm going to listen one way. And then I'm going to ask you to basically repeat your story, and I'm going to listen differently. And I want all of the rest of us to see the difference between the two ways that I listen, and then we can process a little bit of that. Is there anybody that's willing to be my volunteer? Anyone have a loss that they'd like to talk about today? Fight with the kids, whatever.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Willie. Jerry, I'm going to ask you to just put a timer on for 2 minutes and then let us know when we're done. Willie, I'm going to ask you just to share, and I'm going to listen. You'll see how it feels, and then we'll listen again differently. Okay.
Okay. Let me see if I could do this.
Okay.
The latter part of last year.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? It's a
Yeah.
little dark behind you.
It's this room and it's the color. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to. Okay.
Yeah.
You're
But
okay.
anyway, normally we have this tradition in my family where I would meet with my parents in Chicago, Illinois, and I have a large family. And
Where are you from?
That's where I'm from, but right now I'm currently living in Michigan.
Oh, okay. So
But I've been living in Michigan for 20 plus years now, but every year I go and visit with my siblings and my family. We just have this wonderful family gathering. And of course, with all of
you have a big family like me. That's so nice.
Yes, on both sides. My mom's family is huge and my dad.
So
And
nice.
so this last year was the first time in my life for a long time that I was not able to go. I ended up with COVID. Didn't know I had COVID, but then when I
But
lost
you're here, so you're healthy now.
yes, I
Okay.
lost the sense of smell and I just thought I had a cold. So I went and took the test and lo and behold, I had that. So that stopped me from going.
It's awful.
Then I ended up not being able to celebrate with my son, and I have grandkids. So I have 3 grandkids here. So Christmas, I was at home. And then of course it spilled over into the new year. So I wasn't able to hang out with them. And then I fell down my stairs.
Oh my goodness.
I tripped over a bag.
You
And
got to make sure you lift those things and not leave stuff around them.
it was really crazy, but at my age, I thought about it because I had a cap on my head and a padded jacket. And I thought about the effects that it would have had not I had on that padded coat and that big, thick cap on my head because I fell backwards.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
Did you end up in
anyway,
the hospital?
No, I'm telling you, the coat and the cap
Oh
cushioned
my goodness.
my body.
Okay.
And
Lucky
so
you.
anyway, that was an experience for me. So I felt some kind of way about all of that.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
not being able to be around my family and not being able to do some of the things that I want to do, then having that experience on top of it.
Oh my
Is that 2
goodness.
minutes?
Oh, Jerry, I didn't see it, but I see that she did do that in the chat. Okay, thank you. Yes, your 2 minutes are up. Okay, so we're gonna do that again if you don't mind.
Okay.
And I'm gonna ask you to share your story, and I'm gonna listen differently this time. And then we'll talk about whether or not you noticed a difference and what other people noticed as they watched.
Okay, I think I already noticed, but anyway, okay.
I hope so.
Yeah, last year, in the latter part of last year, I ended up not being able to spend Christmas and the New Year's holiday with my family. I ended up catching COVID, which kept me at home. And then after that, I ended up falling down some stairs, which also kept me at home and away from my family. So it was just something that had never happened to me before. But this is the first time I had this experience of not being able to fellowship and hang out with my family. And so I just felt some kind of way through that whole process. So that's.
Tell me what kind of way you felt.
In regards to me talking to you now?
Yeah.
You
No, I
listened
mean
to
about
me.
not being able to see your family. That sounds
Well,
really rough.
It was. I miss them because this is something that we always do. And just to not be able to be with them, not to be able to spend time with my grandkids who live here in Michigan and my son. So I was just at home by myself throughout that whole experience. So yeah, it was a lonely experience.
Sounds very lonely.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I would love to hear from you and also from others what it was like for you to be listened to in two different ways, and see if you felt the difference, and what it was like for other people to watch that interaction or both of those interactions.
Okay, the first time when I was sharing the story, I was just all over the place and I was just talking really super fast and everything, but you were interjecting a lot. And so it just, I noticed that. But the second time around, I wasn't really all over the place, but you listened to me and then you responded to me in a way that made me feel as though you were listening to me and you understood what my feelings were. So that's what I picked up.
Good. Okay. What about other people who are watching that interaction? What was it like for others to see that? Go ahead, Buffy.
I started giggling, so I was trying to hide my mouth as you were doing that because I know that's not how you normally would listen. But especially when she talked about falling with her big coat, and you're like, you really need to be careful. So obviously, just the tone in and of itself with how you responded the second time was very caring and wanting to listen to her. It was just more obvious, and it was uncomfortable for those listening because of the interruptions and whatnot.
Trust me, it's uncomfortable for me too. When I do it, I feel awful. But the reality is we listen to each other that way, right? Like we often have conversations where we're interrupting one another or giving advice or trying to cheer people up. That's like kind of typical. Maybe I was a little overboard just to prove a point, but that's how people talk and listen to one another. And I use this acronym when I'm listening to people. It's the acronym for WAIT, WAIT. Why am I talking? And I really remind myself of that. Why am I talking? Like, why do I need to know where she lives? She's sharing this story and I'm just asking questions because I'm curious. And I think in some way, knowing the answers to those questions is going to make me understand her more or be able to offer something else. And really, she already knows where she lives. So I'm interrupting her for my own benefit. And if I'm really listening to her, I want it to be all about her benefit. I don't need to ask her questions. She knows exactly who she was missing. And so if I'm quiet and I just wait and listen, she can share more of her story and where she wants to take it, right? When I'm interrupting her and saying, did you go to the hospital? Or you shouldn't leave your bag by the stairs. She may have been wanting to talk about something and now I've like interrupted her thought. And I don't allow her to just share. And if we could all just, when somebody, it tells us about a loss that they've experienced, just say, do you want to tell me about that? And then be quiet. And let them share. It's so powerful. And this is just an activity, a 2-minute activity, but it honestly doesn't take that much longer than that if we're really quiet. I think another reason why we often don't ask people about how they're doing is because we're afraid that we don't have enough time. If we say like, how are you doing? And then, oh my God, we open a can of worms and I've got a class in a half an hour, it's scary. But if we're really quiet and we really truly listen to them, it often doesn't take as much time as we think it will. I do this activity often. And I remember one gentleman, 51 years old, he shared with a partner and said it had been 30 years since his father died. And he said, this is the first time I've actually been able to share the whole, because in 2 minutes, no interruptions, I was actually able to share like what happened to my dad. And it's the first time because I'm always interrupted and people are always asking questions or changing the subject or trying to make me feel better. And it can be really powerful. So I encourage all of you to try it. You can go home tonight, or some of you might be home already. If you have somebody to eat dinner with, you can actually not even tell them you're doing it. Just listen to them for 2 minutes, see what happens, see how much more information they're able to share. And you can show them that you're listening. I hope, Willie, that you could see I was listening to you at least the second time. I wasn't the first time. I drank some water. I wasn't paying attention. You could really show somebody that you're listening with your body language. And you don't have to be 100% silent. You can certainly, do you want to tell me more about that and encourage them to talk? When I said, wait, why am I talking? I always think to myself, am I talking because I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I need something, or am I talking to get them to talk more? And if I'm saying something like, that sounds really hard, do you want to tell me more about that? That's an appropriate use of my words, right? Because then it's going to get them to say more. But if you say things like, oh, I know exactly what that's like, let me tell you about what happened to me, then all of a sudden it's not about them anymore. So you want to think about, why are you speaking? I don't know if anybody else had any comments or feedback about that activity. I don't see any, so I will move on, but feel free if you have anything to put it in the chat box and we can try to get to that too. Okay. Okay. The other thing we want to try to do is help students identify potential support systems as they research colleges. One of the ways is called a support map. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. There we go, a support map. Are you able on the Jamboard, even if you can't share, if you can't use it, are you able to flip the pages at the top? Anyone? At the top, there's like, it says 1 out of 4, and there's little arrows. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So if you go to page 3, I put a support map that I created there so you can see that. Support maps are really an opportunity to sit down with the student and help them identify different supports in the various communities that they're part of. So for example, you might identify people in your family, then your close friends and roommates. Next, you might look at the larger communities that you're part of, like clubs and sports teams, religious organizations, academic supports, including your teachers, your resident assistants, or your advisors. You also might consider professional supports, such as therapists and tutors, doctors, all those kinds of people. So you can look at this Jamboard. If you have other ideas about support systems that should be included in a Jamboard, feel free to add them to the chat box or just call them out. We'd be happy to hear from you. I said before, I'm just facilitating this conversation, but I know that there's lots of wisdom in this room. So I'm always happy to hear from you if you have other ideas. So I created this one. I think it's available. I think we're going to email it out so you'll have it, but you can also make your own, change it, and create the support systems that are available. So what you would do is take something like this, right? The first box says counseling center. So you can write down the name of the therapist, the address, the phone number for the therapist. You can pick like places and spaces. If you're on a college campus, maybe they know that there's this great tree they like to sit underneath, or a hiking trail. My son he goes to college in upstate New York, and there's beautiful waterfalls, and he's up by the Finger Lakes, and he's got that opportunity. In other spaces, there may be other opportunities that you want to like specifically write down in the support map. So when they're struggling, they can just look at this. They don't have to think about what should I be doing next. All of their supports are right there, and they can identify them.
I'd love to share an example or the ways in which I've used this support map as the college access director and as an advisor to high school students. We guided our students, graduating students, through creating grad plans, a plan A, B, and C. And we would have something similar to this as part of their graduation plan, where together and over time, we would explore all of these resources that were specific to their own needs and experiences, like a network of support that they would be transitioning into. And then we had them present their graduation plans to community members, to other peers, 11th graders, and then their caregivers. And so it was a beautiful way of teaching and modeling to the younger students, and then also bringing their family and existing network of support into the conversation and the know around what they may need and how they may access it so they can be of support to them. So I just want to share, I really love this map and activity process and the ways it's been able to support students I've known.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I love that idea. I think about so often, like, for so many of what we consider like positive transitions in our lives, we create plans, right? When you're getting married, you have somebody buys you a book that's like all about 6 months before the wedding, hire the band, and 3 weeks before the wedding, check whatever, table arrangements. When you're having a baby, there's always like this birth plan. But when we're going through really difficult transitions, people don't talk about it and we don't plan for them. And it's kind of doesn't make sense because everything is a transition and we really should be planning for those. People have started to think about like end of life plans. Transitioning to college is a really big change and loss for so many people, and we should be planning for that. So I think we focus so much on this is a good thing, right? You've worked hard to get to college. Whoever's supporting you get there, they've worked hard, and it's just supposed to be good. But it's not always good. Even good things can be challenging. So it's okay to talk about the fact that this is a great thing. I'm in college, right? I'm happy to be here. And I also am struggling with this transition. And this is a way to help them with that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leora. I'm on staff and was able to join a little bit late. The piece that I feel is really important for this conversation that I haven't heard yet and would love to hear examples of is also not just the loss of the transition, but also young people who are holding grief needing to identify who they can go to for therapeutic and therapy support on campus. And the power of thinking about making meaning with a young person in high school or beyond as they either go to community college, city college, or college and university, to say, what has supported you in this stage of your life? What might support you next stage of your life? And what might be formal supports and informal supports? Whether it's where you're going to get your hair done or where you're going to church or where you're going to get psychological services. So I think it's the both and. It's not only helping navigate the loss of place and whole and community, but also for young people who are grieving, making sure that there's a continuation of arms wrapped around them and also for them to feel empowered to help seek when they get to a new place.
Absolutely. I think that is so important. Thank you for sharing that. I think it is really important. These support maps can be used in so many different ways. I love them for many different reasons. So it's not just when you're going off to a new place. If you're staying at home and you're going to community college, some of the supports that you had already may continue to be in place and some may not. So thinking about what else do I need? And this is I'm adding some additional stressors to my life. So I may need different things at this point. I used to be able to mow the lawn. Now I'm not going to have time. So I need to think about how I'm going to be able to get my lawn mowed, those kinds of things. Some colleges will have guides, pamphlets about some of the activities that are available on campus. And they're usually beautiful and sunny and looks like everything's great. But you can create your own guide to transitioning to school, either as a freshman, as a new person starting school, or when you're returning to school after a loss. So you can think about, how am I going to tell my teachers or my friends about emotional needs that I might have? What kinds of supports have been helpful to me in the past, and to make sure that what you need in the future, like sleeping is really important to me. Exercise is really important. Access to fresh air has been really important to me. So you want to think about those kinds of things when you're picking a college space or university, wherever you're going to go. Are you going to be able to get some of the things that have worked for you in the past? And if not, what are some other things that you might be able to consider? I don't have access to really fresh air where I live, and I would love to go someplace where I would have access to that. So you might want to think about those things too. You want to prepare students to advocate for themselves bereavement information is not as widely shared as it might have been in high school with teachers. So oftentimes information travels with students from grade to grade, for better or worse. Sometimes it's not great, but that does often happen. In college, frequently that information is not shared. If you experience the death of a parent while you're in school, all of your teachers don't automatically get notified. It's really up to the student to notify each individual teacher. And then it's up to the teacher to decide how they're going to respond to that loss. So one teacher may say, take as much time as you need. I'm not counting absences. Don't worry about that test. The next teacher may say, you knew about that assignment 3 weeks ago, so you waited till the last minute and you still have to take the test. And so you really want to help kids advocate for themselves, know who on campus they can go to if they need help advocating, because oftentimes it's going to be hard. It's a lot to ask of them to go to each individual teacher, to go to each coach, to go to each club that they're in and tell them what's going on, especially when they've never really had to do that before. So teaching them how to advocate is really key.
Can I say very briefly, in California, there are programs that already serve as networks of support in many of the community and state colleges called EOP or EOPS. And they are already like an ecosystem that exists within the school that you can warm hand off your young people into. And I wonder if there's I'm sure there's other programs similarly across the country, but they already have email chains with professors. They know which classes are best for students that enter into their program because they create spaces to get to know their students. And I think there's piecing these maps together yourself as a high school teacher, which you can do, which takes a lot of work, but I really suggest also finding the programs that already exist that have a lot of these things thought about, and they can be second voices or advocates for students as well, so they don't have to do all of that on their own.
Absolutely. You do not need to reinvent the wheel if it's already out there. So thank you. Oh, that's nice, Kristina. Thank you for sharing that. A template that students can share with teachers each year from experience camps, which is another great resource. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that because a student is grieving, that's a piece of who they are. But it's actually really important also that I like to say we're living in the and. So you can be grieving and experiencing other things at the same time. In fact, most of us do. So it's great to find things that are unrelated to grief, to find things that you can really enjoy and lose track of time doing, provide opportunities to develop passions, to express your identity, to express feelings. Taking a break from grief can actually be just as important as focusing on it. So you want to give students opportunities to do grief unrelated activities. I know of one woman who shared that the photography club for her was really like, it saved her life in college, not only because she found a passion for photography, but it also allowed her to express some grief. She would take pictures, and I'm not creative, so I don't want to even try to like use words to describe how she would do that, but she would find things that she just fit her mood or allowed her to be creative and express herself in ways that other things wouldn't. So really encourage you to encourage your students to think about what are some things that you would like to get involved in when you need a break or need some other way to express yourself. And the clubs on campus can be one of those ways. I did mention Active Minds, but a lot of colleges also have mental health clubs, student-run mental health organizations on campus, which can also be a really great way. It's not necessarily a break from the grief, but if you're looking for ways to get involved, to find people who are like-minded, who want to talk about mental health issues, finding a club on campus that focuses on those things can be really important. Okay, these are just a couple of references. I talked about most of these things as I was presenting, so I wanted to just provide you with the resources. So if you're interested in learning more, you can certainly check out these references as well. And then some additional resources. Again, I talked about most of these, but in addition to Guardian Lane, which I really do feel like is a great resource, and I appreciate Kristina coming on and talking about it because it provides kids wherever they are with some support. But the National Alliance for Children's Grief has tons of resources on their website. And it also has a support finder. So you can find out about grief support in your area, either at the time of their loss, if they're in school, or if they're looking at specific colleges. It would allow them to think about if they want to go to an in-person support group, if there's one in that area. There's also the School Crisis and Bereavement Center, which also provides a ton of great resources. Feel free to go on there. Heal Grief, as I mentioned, the Coalition to Support Grieving Students, Active Minds, and the Dinner Party, as I talked about. I hope you can use some of those sources. And I just want to say thank you. I loved being part of this. Here's some more information about me. If you're interested in learning more, reaching out, if you have questions, I'm always available. I would love to hear from you. I actually met Lior because I went to a presentation and she was speaking, and I was so impressed with her that I reached out to her and got connected that way. If people have questions or are interested in talking more, I would love that. I really do love the networking. I did want to leave time for questions and see if people have questions. I don't know if there was anything in the chat box because I haven't really been able to read it. There is an evaluation, so if people do want to fill that out, I know that that's always helpful. So feel free to do that. Any other comments or anything that anybody has? I'm hoping to hear from all of you and learn from each of us.
I think it's great that we have this time and maybe people can share ways they are shuttling their students into new settings. I know for me, I've felt most afraid for the young folks that chose not to go to higher learning institutions and wondered about how to make sure that they are supported in the ways that they need to if they don't have a school setting to help them. But what are other people doing to support with the transition or the handoff? What have your experiences been in this way?
I'd love to know success stories or challenges as far as students who have left for school. I shared a little bit about why I started the organization that I started. I think about, and obviously we don't know answers, we'll never have those, but my son's an athlete. So he called me on like day 2 or 3 of college and said, you know, I'm filling out a form for the rugby team and I don't know my social security number. So I gave him the social security number and I thought, I wonder if his friend left for college and had to fill out a form for the first time. For better or worse, I had filled out all of my kids' forms. Perhaps I shouldn't have, so that they could have learned their social security number. But up until he left for college, I had filled out all of the forms. And I wonder about his friend, if he got to college and had to fill out a form for the first time that said emergency contact information or parent information, and it said mother and father, and he didn't know what to do for father's information. And I thought, I wonder if anybody prepared him for that. Or when his mom dropped him off and his roommate said, "Where's your dad?" Did he know how to respond? Had he practiced with somebody how to talk about his family in a way that felt comfortable for him? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I don't know if people have heard from students stories like that or success stories, things that worked for them as soon as they got to college. That was helpful.
Resonated with what you were saying because it was 10 years ago for me, but I guess when I went to college, I wasn't really prepared. I didn't know how financial aid worked or any of that paperwork. I think that caused me to go down this route of accumulating a lot of debt, and I didn't know who to turn to. Then I ultimately had to go back home, and it was a grieving process for me too, because I had lost basically all the new friends that I made out there. It made me think about if other students had gone through something similar too. And then I thought more about how now, like in COVID and how things are complicated too. I'm wondering how students are experiencing that now as they're going to college during this time. And I was wondering if these kinds of conversations are being had a lot throughout like the country.
Great question.
I think also people might be students that have entered college in 2020. I know my best friend's son entered college in 2020 and they had to go home. And part of that process is working from home, going to school from home, and he grieves that process, that college experience, that missing out on the connections that you could have had. I think that can be part of it as well in that process.
Absolutely. There's been so many losses for kids in the past, few years, even the ones that were there on campus, and then everything shut down and you're basically like stuck in your room, in your dorm room, and not able to engage with other students outside of your online classes, even if you were on campus.
Even before COVID, the school that I've spent a really significant amount of time in, we had a 97% college going rate, but by the first year, more than half of our young folks had decided not to continue or not even go. And this is predominantly Black and Brown young people in a community forging their way through us first in their family. And so many of them needed to return, and there was a tremendous amount of grief in going to college and leaving their homes, and then grief in not being able to continue. And so I think that just really speaks to the network of support that must exist, and the responsive, attuned network of support for each individual young person. And that takes so much work and energy, but it really is important.
Do you mind, Mandi, if I ask if we can take a moment to brainstorm ways, and maybe you guys do this in your school communities, but how can we find the silent grievers? How can we help them know that, hey, there's resources, help for you? Because a lot of times I hear that, and I was one of them, they get missed and they just go on when there was an opportunity to help them.
Yeah, I'll share a little story. There was a gentleman that I met with whose wife had died. She had been in the hospital for a little while, probably a month or so. And he had a five-year-old was really struggling at the beginning when mom first went into the hospital. And after a few weeks, adjusted, I guess, and was doing okay and stopped asking, where's mommy? Because she was in the ICU. He wasn't allowed to see her. And then mom died. And the father didn't want to tell his son, because he said he's okay now. He's not wetting the bed anymore. He's sleeping in his own bed. He's playing with his friends. Like, everything's okay. And I don't want to set him back again. So he was really struggling with telling him. We talked about it for a bit, and I thought, I wonder what this little boy is thinking in his mind about where mommy is. And kids make up stories to understand their world. That's natural developmental process. I have no idea, but let's pretend that this little boy thought mommy went away because I was bad. Maybe he didn't do something. He didn't eat all of his vegetables one night, so then mommy ended up in the hospital. Or maybe he was mad at his mom and had a bad thought about her, and then she ends up in the hospital. So maybe he thinks, if I'm really good, mommy's going to come back. I'm going to just be really good. I'm going to be just how I'm supposed to be. And that's what dad was saying. He's being really good. Eventually, he's going to have to know that mom's not coming back. And what message are we sending to this child? You're not good enough. Mom didn't come back. You thought you were good and you weren't good enough. So it's so important to check in with the kids who look like they're okay, because it doesn't necessarily mean they're okay. They could be working really hard to look like they're okay. And one of the things, I did this little activity with Willie, which I so appreciated her doing with me, but it's so important, I think, when we're listening to someone or just observing them. But to say, I know your mom died and your grades haven't changed and your friends haven't changed and your behavior hasn't changed. I wonder what's going on for you inside because I don't see anything. If you're, ever interested in talking to me, I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I always say, like, we can open the door and then they get to choose whether or not they want to walk through it. My son had shared that while they were remote at the beginning of COVID, one of his teachers would start the class every day with a little check-in. This is not like he's an accounting major, so it wasn't like a touchy-feely kind of class, but she would just start the class with, just want to check in. How's everybody doing? Let's take a deep breath. He said he never shared, but most of the time someone would share. It was a class of maybe 30 kids. Somebody might say, it's really noisy in my house today. Everybody's home, working from home. I'm stressed, whatever it is. And he said, but I really felt connected to that teacher because she asked. And even though I didn't share anything, I felt like if I needed to share, I could with her, not with everybody else, but with this one teacher that would just like knock on the door of their hearts. And they get to, like I said, they get to choose whether or not they walk in. And I think it's really important that we do that with all kids, not just with the ones that are showing us, that are behaving their grief, because we never know how much energy they're spending to look like they're fine.
Good point. I heard at one school, they put signs in a bathroom for different resources with a QR code so that the student, of course, if you think about it, they had to have their cell phone, but they could, in their own time, get the support that they needed through these QR codes. I thought that was pretty interesting too, for that student who will never say anything.
So the QR code went to who?
To a resource that the school had put together.
That's a great idea.
And I'm just reflecting on this conversation and trying to rewire it a little bit more back to the connection between high school, middle school, and post-secondary. Just speaking from my lived experience, we generally at SER have a way of wanting to share headlines, not details, to be trauma-informed for experience. So my headline is that I had a really significant loss when I was in college, and also was directing the EOP program that Oriana was referencing. And so was supporting students who were navigating lots of death and grief, going back home, coming to college. And so I hold both of those experiences as a student myself, and what supports immediately kicked into gear because of my privilege and social connections and relationships on campus. And also what I noticed and need to provide as a student support service provider for all students. So we knew at EOP, we learned that pre-winter break and post-winter break and pre-Thanksgiving break and post-Thanksgiving break and all the breaks of coming home, when you were talking about going back and forth, that there was enormous grief that showed up, both anticipatory grief of going home, and then losses that were occurring in community due to community violence that often happened over break, that students were coming back experiencing without anyone to hold space for them. So part of our work in recovery, particularly, is to anticipate how to mitigate harm and mitigate pain that people are holding on to. And most of that requires us as the folks in the system to be attuned with what some of the pain points are and might be in someone's landscape of their life, so that I'm not waiting for someone to come to me, but the moment that school starts, we have a group that may not even be titled grief. It just might be titled holding on to home and to school at the same time. And we can navigate both of those together. The other piece that I would offer, and Kristina, thank you so much for your question. The other piece that came to mind is, what would it look like for every single student to be required, just like they're required to write personal statements often for college, to write a grief support plan, if we're going to assume that grief is universal? What would that look like? And normalize grief as being either a loss of identity or a loss of someone, a loved person, right? Or someone who is a complicated person, not always loved.
Let's say an important person.
Right.
Yeah.
So the both and just really appreciating the conversation and noting that we're about to move into close, which I get to do. So I just wanted to see Kristina and Mandi, if you had any last words, or if anyone else who's in this conversation up in the chat, if folks wanted to put a feeling, a sentence, a learning before we move into close.
I just want to say that I appreciate so much being here. I always learn something when I present. I'm so happy to have been part of this. I do hope that people will reach out if they have questions. I don't have all of your emails, so you have mine. So feel free if you would like to speak further.
Same, and thank you, Mandi, for inviting me to share my story and Guardian Lane with you all.
I'm going to invite Jerry to pull up some of the slides to help us visually through. Oriana got to open the space and I get to close it. Another reminder that the PowerPoint slides and resources that Mandi and Kristina prepared for you are up on our event page, which I can put into the chat in a little bit. If you are still interested in extending your learning, particularly if you are educators, we have a Learning from Loss book club that starts next week, led by the author of Learning from Loss, Brittany Collins, and we welcome you to join it. Brittany will be leading a 3-part book club with themes for each session. So those of you who are teachers, educators in the classroom, or you were in the classroom, and or if you're not and you're just interested, which is also good, please join us for the session. We do really hope that folks take a little bit of time to complete the evaluation for today. We know it's a small group. Every single one of your feedback is really helpful for us, for Mandi and Kristina to continue to improve and strengthen facilitation around a really complicated conversation, and for us as a project to learn from you. We'll send this to you in a follow-up as well. As I mentioned, and as Mandi mentioned, there are lots of supporting resources that are up on our website and up on the event page. So those are there for you. Okay, I'm just going to take a pause moment here. Your very own opener of today's session, Oriana Edis and Nora Jones Bay, are leading a educator participatory action research experience. It did launch this week, but I think, Oriana, it's still open for folks. So this is a group, if you're an educator who has navigated crisis, it's a space for you to come and in a really gorgeous community, do some action research around what wellness means to you in your own recovery and renewal. So that is open to you, and that's up on our upcoming events website. So that's for you. Actually, Ori, did you want to say anything about that in case anyone's interested?
We would love to have you just be on. We'd love to have your energy and experience. And we did have our first session, but it's the right time to join next week. So please consider it as we explore what wellness barriers exist in your school ecosystem or in your world, and how to create individual and collective wellness within our communities.
Thanks. And I just put the whole website for all of our upcoming events into the chat box. As many of you have already seen some of these, but we've got resources that are available for you. I'm not really going to go through these right now because I want to center on what's coming up and also close us out. If you go to our resources on our webpage, there's lots of goodies, especially the one that's really lovely for today is the What Helps and What Harms Students Crisis Recovery. I really want to welcome folks to take a listen with your eyes into that. We listen to young adults who've experienced crisis in schools and what they needed, what crisis meant to them, what recovery and renewal meant to them. It's a way for us to really listen into young people's voices to reimagine how we can support them. And then the last 3 pieces that I wanted to offer is that we've got our memorialization and commemoration page, which has a ton of resources and events and archived learning experiences if you're interested in how to hold space in school community. There's different things happening in the chat. Just pause chat and this so that we can merge them together. So the memorialization and commemoration is a space to resource you. We also have another page that specifically supports suicide postvention in schools, which many of you might also be interested in. And the last is that we've got a blog page on supporting grief awareness, one of which Oriana was a blogger, wrote Oriana's piece. And we just wanted to offer that these are pieces written by our staff, book lists for grieving children, how to hold altars and ofrendas in education spaces, and more. Those are also available to you. The very last piece before we close is that some of you, like Mandi mentioned, some of you might have been like, whoa, this was a lot or different than what I thought, or I needed this and I got this. And I just want to very warmly extend from project director and all of our team to you. If you have a specific workshop that you'd like us to bring to you or staff particularly, if you have coaching and consulting that you'd like to engage in, please let us know. That's what we're funded to do by SAMHSA and what we want to do for you. All that to say, happy for you to take the deck down. I'm going to offer one more time in the chat box as you exit, if you might put a one learning or one new thought or idea that came from you in this, that came to you in this space. And then that can be your way of saying goodbye to us, almost like the old school way. If you were in a hotel conference room and you put a Post-it on the wall and left, if you can put a learning that you got from this workshop as you exit, and we will follow up with you soon. Big thanks to Mandi and Kristina, and to Ori and Gary.
If you have ideas that you think you'd like to share, feel free to put them in now or later on if you're thinking about them.
Thanks for being here.